Hi everyone, so today we are going to talk about the immune system, which is a very new system we're going to look at. It is also part of living organism, and what this system does is that it protects us from diseases. And most likely diseases that are caused by a number of things, but mostly pathogens. In this system, you're going to see words such as lymphatic, leukocyte, and pathogen. We have already discussed pathogens. Leukocyte is a very new word to you, and if you want to use a simpler version of this word, it is white blood cell. So another word for leukocyte is white blood cell. We're going to talk about the other words throughout the lesson because I do not want to overwhelm you at this moment. So beginning, what I want you to know before you move on is that we have a system that protects us from diseases, and this system is known as the immune system. The immune system uses white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, to fight off pathogens. And pathogens are basically microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi, parasites, and viruses. So here is a diagram of the immune system, and what you can notice is that there are patches of things around the body, these little red dots, and these are called lymph nodes. And we have these sites, and these sites called lymph nodes contains a lot of white blood cells. And these white blood cells are there to fight off pathogens. So how do the white blood cells, so these white blood cells, they travel to different sites, and in the next slide I'm going to explain how they travel. So from this slide, what I really want you to understand, that we do have an immune system that fights diseases. Again, I'm going to reiterate this, that it uses white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, and they're found mostly in lymph nodes that are found at various parts of our body. So these lymph nodes that are found all over our body, and now I'm making it more detailed so you can see what is happening, is that they're connected. And immediately you might look at these connections and you're like, oh, those are blood vessels. Actually, they're not blood vessels, but they are lymph vessels, or lymphatic vessels. Now, what does the lymphatic vessel do? Basically, the lymphatic vessel carries or transports lymph or white blood cells to various parts between our blood vessels. So white blood cells travels in two places or two vessels. They can travel with our regular blood through the blood vessels, or it can travel in its own vessel called the lymphatic vessels. So we have several lines of defense. And what I mean by several lines of defense is that whenever we are attacked by a pathogen, our body is equipped or made in such a way that it tries to prevent the infection from happening. So we have our first line of defense. And what I mean by the first line of defense is that our outer body, I'm going to just draw a little stick figure here, somewhat. Our outer body have skin, and our skin is very important so as to block out any type of pathogen. So any type of virus or bacteria, parasite trying to get into our body, it would be blocked by our skin. Also, our nostrils have a lot of mucus, sweat. All of these things help to block out pathogen, and that is our first line of defense. It's just trying to block out every type of pathogen that are trying to get into our body. Say, for example, now something do get inside our body because we have a cut or a scratch or scrape. We're going to have our second line of defense. And our second line of defense basically is inside. What is happening inside of our body? What is it that the white blood cells are going to do? And our second line of defense is made up of the white blood cell. The first thing that is going to happen is that we are going to have an inflammatory kind of response or inflammation. And I'm going to attach a video at the bottom of this that you can really look on how exactly do our body uses the second line of defense to fight off infection. So there are many types of white blood cells in our body. They're not just a single type. There are many types, and the first type we're going to look at is one that is called neutrophil. Now, each of these blood cells, white blood cells, they have a different shape, and it's easily recognizable based on their shape and also the function that they do. For example, the neutrophil, they recognize any type of bacteria, fungi, or any type of damaged tissue or cells. And what they do is that they engulf it. Now, what do you mean by engulf? Engulf means that they eat it up. They pull them inside of their body and they kill them. All right? That type of response is called phagocytic, phagocytic. All right? So that's a phagocytic type of response where as soon as the white blood cell, the neutrophil, see a bacteria or detects a bacteria, a fungi, or a damaged tissue, it engulfs it and it gets rid or kills that. Here is a better example, the diagram that you're looking at. As you can see, here we have some bacteria trying to get these orange things, or bacteria trying to get into our body. Our white blood cell will move through the blood vessels, through the lymph, and it will go and it engulfs those type of bacteria. Alright? These, again, a neutrophil is known as a phagocytic type of white blood cell because it engulfs or eats the bacteria, fungi, or damaged tissue. Normally what will happen is that after they have eaten or engulfed these bacteria, fungi, or damaged tissue, they themselves will die. And when they die, they secrete what is called pus. And that is the whitest substance you'd see normally when you have acne or somebody have a cut is trying to scrape, whatever. It's basically inflammation coming out of your skin. And that is because these neutrophils, as soon as they eat or engulf a bacteria, fungi, or damaged tissue, they will die themselves. The next type of leukocyte or white blood cell we're going to look at is eosinophil or basophil. Eosinophils or basophils, they release chemicals to fight off infection. These chemicals, an example of them is histamine. You might probably hear of this word if you're allergic to things. They fight off specific things such as parasite and bacteria. And what happened is that they do not directly engulf the parasite or bacteria, but they release these chemicals that will kill them. This is not a phagocytic cell, so it will not engulf, as I said before. And sometimes when we have a problem with our eosinophil and basophil, they will kind of release histamine in reaction to anything. Sometimes false things. For example, it might be a pollen, and they release these histamine, and that is called an allergic reaction. That's how you actually get an allergic reaction, because instead of normal things could be in your body, and your body will react to it as a way of, oh, here's a pathogen coming in, let me release some chemical called histamine. So you might be eating a peanut, and all of a sudden you have an inflammatory response, and you're swelling up, and you're reacting because your body is producing histamine, thinking that it is a parasite or a bacteria. So the eosinophils or basophils are the cells that are responsible for releasing these chemicals in defense. And if you notice, the cells are kind of bilobe, meaning that it has two lobes, so they're easily recognizable by looking at that kind of bean-shaped nucleus that it has. And then we have our third type of white blood cell called lymphocytes. Now there are two types of lymphocytes. There is the helper B And there's the killer T. I do not want there's so much other type of B and T cells, but I'm just going to make it very basic that as soon as a virus now enters our body, it releases a specific shape antibody. Alright? And that antibody will bind to an antigen that is found on the virus. So let me just do a little diagram so you can understand. Say this is the virus and our body has these helper B cells. Our helper B will release these things that are called antibody, and on our virus have antigen and or antigen, sorry, and the antigen will be detected by the antibody, and once they're detected and they bind, then the killer T cell steps in and get rid of that infected cell by killing them. So these two cells work together. The helper B and the killer T, they work together. First, the helper B identify the virus. And how do they identify them? Because they have receptors called antibody that will be released once it recognizes an antigen on the virus. And then once that combination or that reaction happens, the killer T will step in and get rid of that. Here's a better diagram for you to really look at. And I'm going to walk you through this diagram so it becomes a little bit simpler to understand. First, what you'll notice is that we have our helper B cell. Alright, that's our helper B cell. Our helper B cell have these little receptors on its surface. And these receptors are called antibodies. Alright, whenever these viruses, they come into our body, it starts to release the receptors on its surface, and then the receptor and the antibody will react with each other, and then the killer T cell comes in and kills those cells. Finally, we have our monocytes. On our monocytes, they engulf dead cells and bacteria. They're like the cleanup crew. After all the things that have happened, they come over and they clean up all of the dead cells and bacteria that are lying around. And that is basically, they're like at the end of an immune response or a defense in fighting microorganisms. So just let's recap all the things. It's been so much that you have learned from this video. So let's recap from the beginning and make a summary. We have a system, just a second. So we have a system that detects or fight off infection, and that is our immune system, also known as the lymphatic system. This system consists of nodes where white blood cells are found at, and I'm going to write white blood cells. Another word for white blood cell is leukocy, leukocytes. And these white blood cell travels in lymph nodes. Lymph vessels, sorry. We have several types. Of white blood cells or leukocytes. And they are neutrophil, N-E-U. And the neutrophil, basically, it fights off bacteria and fungi by engulfing. And this type of white blood cell is said to be phagocytic, P-H-A-G-O-C-Y, because it eats up the bacteria, it engulfs it, or the fungi. Then the second type of white blood cell that we talked about is the basophil or the eosinophil. And what they do is that they fight off bacteria and parasites, and they do this by releasing a chemical. Example, histamine. And then we talk about lymphocytes. And they have the killer T and helper B. The killer T, the helper B releases antibodies. I should never make that mistake. They release antibodies, and the antibody detects the antigen on the microorganism or the pathogen. And once that detection is made, the killer T cell steps in and get rid of them or kill those cells. And then we have the monocytes. And this is like the cleanup crew that it goes and it engulfs or eat up all the type of dead bacteria and dead cell. The monocyte is also said to be phagocytic. Any cell that eats up or engulfs microorganisms are said to be phagocytic. So that's why the neutrophil and the monocytes are said to be phagocytic type of cell. So here's like a pop quiz kind of question that I have for you guys to see if you really understand this. If you were a superhero cell, which would you be? Would you be in A, a neutrophil that eat the bad guys up and spit them out? Would you be B, a eosinophil or basophil that spray them with histamine to kill them? Would you be C, a lymphocyte, either a helper T or a killer T cell that tagged your enemies? Or would you be a monocyte that cleans up after the dead body?